There is a quiet ache many people carry, an ache that doesn't scream but whispers through choices, patterns, and longing. It shows up in the men you fall for, the ones who are distant, unavailable, emotionally closed, or perpetually just out of reach. And you ask yourself again and again, why do I keep loving someone who cannot love me back? This is not a flaw in your character. It is not weakness. It is not because you are too much or not enough. It is a story written deep within you, long before these men ever appeared. You don't fall in love with emotional unavailability by accident. You are drawn to it because it feels familiar. The nervous system does not seek what is healthy. It seeks what is known. If early in life love was inconsistent, conditional, or earned through effort, your body learned a powerful lesson. Love requires pursuit, patience, self-abandonment. Love means waiting. Love means proving. Love means shrinking parts of yourself to keep connection alive. So when you meet someone who cannot fully meet you, something inside you recognizes the pattern and calls it chemistry. You may tell yourself that if you just love harder, communicate better, or give more understanding, they will finally open up. But what you are really trying to do is heal an old wound through a familiar script. You are replaying a childhood strategy. Adapt, endure, hope. Not because it works, but because it once helped you survive. Back then, attachment mattered more than authenticity. You learned to stay connected even when it hurt, because disconnection felt unbearable. Loving someone who cannot love you back also allows you to avoid a deeper fear. What if you chose someone who was truly available? Real intimacy asks you to be seen, not just needed. It requires you to stand in your worth without performing, fixing, or rescuing. For many people, that kind of closeness feels far more threatening than rejection, because rejection confirms an old belief you already carry, but being loved challenges it. There is also a hidden sense of control in loving the unavailable. If they never fully choose you, you never have to risk fully choosing yourself. You can stay in longing rather than presence, fantasy rather than reality. The pain is familiar, predictable, and strangely comforting. But comfort does not mean healing. It only means repetition. Understand this deeply. Their inability to love you is not a reflection of your lovability. It is a reflection of their own unresolved pain, fear of intimacy, or emotional disconnection. Yet when you were taught early on to personalize distance, you internalize the idea that love leaving must be your fault. So you work harder, you explain yourself more, you silence your needs, and each time you do, you abandon yourself in the hope of being chosen. The real heartbreak is not that they cannot love you back. The real heartbreak is that in trying to earn their love, you stop loving yourself. You betray your own boundaries. You normalize crumbs. You call longing passion and anxiety attachment. And slowly you forget that love is not supposed to feel like waiting to be worthy. Healing begins when you stop asking, why don't they love me? And start asking, why do I stay? That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. Because when you see that this pattern was once a survival response, you can thank it for protecting you and gently let it go. You no longer need to earn love. No longer need to earn love by suffering for it. You are not here to convince anyone of your value. You are not here to be a lesson for someone who refuses to grow. You are here to experience mutual presence, emotional safety, and reciprocity. Love that does not require you to disappear. Love that meets you where you are, not where you pretend to be. As you heal, attraction will change. You may feel bored at first with people who are consistent and emotionally available, because peace can feel unfamiliar when chaos was once home. But stay with that discomfort. It is the discomfort of growth, not deprivation. Over time, your nervous system will learn that love does not have to hurt to be real. So here is the call to action. Stop chasing what withholds and start choosing what nurtures. Pause before repeating the pattern. Listen to your body when it tightens, not just when it longs. Practice saying no where you once overgave. Seek support, reflect honestly, and commit to the radical when it tightens, not just when it longs. Act of self-connection. Because the moment you stop trying to be loved by someone who cannot love you, you create space for the most important relationship of your life to finally begin, the one with yourself. And from that place, love will no longer feel like loss. It will feel like home. You are drawn to men who cannot love you back, not because you enjoy pain, but because your nervous system learned very early what love was supposed to feel like. Before you had language, before logic, before choice, your body was already collecting evidence. It noticed who was present, who was absent, who responded to your needs, and who required you to adapt in order to stay connected. Love in those early moments may not have felt safe or consistent, but it felt essential. And when something is essential, the body remembers it with intensity. If care came with unpredictability, if affection was intermittent, if attention had to be earned, or moods had to be managed, your system adapted brilliantly. You learned to scan, to wait, to hope, to endure. You learned that closeness might arrive and disappear without warning. That longing was normal, That attachment meant effort. These lessons were not conscious decisions. They were survival strategies. A child cannot afford to say, "This love is insufficient." A child's nervous system says, "This is what love is, and I must hold on to it." So when you grow up and encounter emotional unavailability, something inside you relaxes, even as it hurts. The distance feels recognizable. The inconsistency feels alive. The unpredictability feels like chemistry. Your body confuses intensity with intimacy, because intensity was once the signal that connection mattered. Calm, steady affection may feel foreign, even suspicious, because it does not activate the old alarm systems you learned to live inside. This is why you can meet someone kind, present, and emotionally available and feel nothing, while feeling magnetically pulled towards someone who keeps you guessing. Your nervous system is not asking, "Is this good for me?" It is asking, "Do I know this?" And familiarity feels like safety, even when it is painful. The body would rather repeat a known hurt than risk an unknown peace. There is also a deep hope embedded in this pattern. Each unavailable man represents a chance to rewrite the past. Somewhere inside there is a belief that if you can finally be chosen by someone who withholds, it will heal the original wound. That this time, if you are patient enough, loving enough, understanding enough, the ending will change. This is not foolishness, it is grief looking for resolution. You are not obsessed with them. You are devoted to the possibility that love can finally stay. But notice the cost. To stay connected to someone who cannot meet you, you must disconnect from yourself. You must silence your needs, soften your boundaries, rationalize neglect, and reinterpret pain as depth. Over time, your inner world becomes organized around them. Their moods, their availability, their approval. This is not love as nourishment. It is love as vigilance, and vigilance is exhausting. You may tell yourself that you are strong, independent, and self-aware, yet still caught in this loop. Awareness alone does not undo nervous system conditioning. You cannot think your way out of a pattern that was learned through the body. Healing begins not with judgment, but with compassion for the part of you that learned to survive this way. That part is not broken. It is loyal. It kept you attached when attachment was necessary. The pain intensifies because unavailability mirrors an old emotional truth that your needs were too much, or inconvenient, or invisible. Every unanswered message, every delayed response, every moment of emotional distance presses on that old bruise. And instead of turning toward yourself with care, you turn toward them with effort. You try to be more understanding, more patient, less demanding. You confuse self-erasure with love, because self-erasure once kept connection intact. This pattern is reinforced by the illusion of potential. You are not loving who they are. You are loving who they could be if they healed, opened up, or finally saw you. Potential keeps you hooked because it postpones grief. As long as you believe change is just around the corner, you don't have to face the loss of what never truly existed. Letting go would mean mourning not just the relationship, but the hope that this time would be different. There is also a subtle sense of worth tied to endurance. If you can tolerate what others would walk away from, it can feel like proof of depth, loyalty, or strength. But endurance is not intimacy. Suffering is not a measure of love. When love requires you to abandon yourself, it is not a testament to your capacity. It is a signal of an old wound asking for care. As long as love is associated with distance, you will keep reaching for those who cannot stay. As long as your body equates anxiety with connection, peace will feel dull and unfamiliar. This is not a moral failing, it is conditioning, and conditioning can change, slowly, gently, through safety, awareness, and repetition of new experiences. The moment you begin to notice the sensation in your body when you are drawn to someone unavailable, the tightness, the urgency, the anticipation mixed with dread, you are already interrupting the pattern. That sensation is not intuition, it is memory, and memory does not have to dictate your future choices. When you understand that your attraction is rooted in familiarity rather than fate, something loosens. You begin to see that what you called love was often a reenactment, that what you chased was not the person, but the resolution of an old story. And old stories lose their power the moment they are seen clearly, without shame, without blame, without the need to rush toward an answer. Loving someone who will never love you back often protects you from a deeper, more frightening vulnerability, being truly seen. Real intimacy is not dramatic or suspenseful. It does not live in longing, guessing, or emotional hunger. It lives in presence, consistency, and mutual availability. And for someone whose early experiences taught them that closeness was unstable or conditional, that kind of intimacy can feel unsafe, even overwhelming. When a man is emotionally unavailable, part of you stays safely hidden. You can focus on understanding him, waiting for him, interpreting his silence, and managing your hope. Your attention moves outward instead of inward. As long as he is distant, you do not have to fully reveal your own needs, fears, anger, or desire. The relationship revolves around pursuit rather than exposure. In that way, loving the unavailable becomes a form of self-protection. If someone were truly present, they would ask you to show up too. They would notice when you pull away. They would respond to your emotions instead of avoiding them. They would see your patterns, your defenses, your contradictions. And being seen like that can feel terrifying if early on visibility led to disappointment, rejection, or emotional overwhelm. Distance feels safer than closeness when closeness once hurt. There is also a subtle control in choosing people who cannot meet you. If they fail to love you fully, it confirms an old belief you already know how to live with. It hurts, but it is familiar. Being genuinely loved, however, threatens that belief. It challenges the story that you are too much, unworthy, or only lovable when you try harder. Acceptance can feel destabilizing when your identity has been shaped around earning affection. In relationships with emotionally unavailable men, you remain in a state of anticipation rather than arrival. You wait for the message, the change, the breakthrough moment when everything finally makes sense. Waiting creates intensity, and intensity can be mistaken for depth, but intensity is often a stress response, not a sign of connection. It keeps your nervous system activated, alert, and engaged. Calm connection, by contrast, can feel empty at first because your system is not used to rest. You may believe that if you let go of the unavailable, you will lose passion, excitement, or meaning, but what you are really afraid of losing is the structure that has organized your emotional life. Longing gives you direction. Hope gives you purpose. Suffering gives you something to work on. Without it, you might have to sit with yourself, with feelings that have been postponed for years. Grief, loneliness, anger, and unmet needs rise to the surface when the distraction of pursuit disappears. Another reason this pattern persists is that emotional unavailability creates a hierarchy where you are always slightly below, reaching upward. This position feels familiar if you learned early on that love flowed downward from someone powerful, distracted, or emotionally dominant. Being the one who wants more, who waits, who adapts, recreates a known emotional posture. Equality, mutual desire, and shared vulnerability can feel disorienting because they require you to stand on the same level and claim your place. You may also be unconsciously loyal to the past. Choosing someone unavailable can be a way of staying connected to earlier relationships that never resolved. There is a sense that if you finally succeed here, everything before will make sense. Letting go feels like betrayal, not just of the person in front of you, but of the younger self who waited and hoped and adapted. So you keep trying, not realizing that the loyalty belongs not to the pain, but to the healing that never came. The fantasy of being the one who finally breaks through is powerful. It gives you a sense of specialness and meaning. If you are the exception, if you are patient enough, loving enough, understanding enough, then the relationship becomes proof of your worth. But this fantasy keeps you tied to self-sacrifice. It teaches you that love is proven through endurance rather than mutual care. And each time you choose potential over reality, you delay the moment when you have to ask what you truly need. There is often shame hidden beneath this pattern. You may judge yourself for staying, for hoping, for returning. That shame deepens the attachment because it makes it harder to step away. Compassion, not criticism, is what loosens the grip. When you see that this pattern once protected you from abandonment or emotional chaos, you can stop fighting yourself and start listening. As you begin to feel into your body rather than your story, you may notice that attraction to unavailable men comes with anxiety, urgency, and beneath this pattern, you may judge yourself for staying, for hoping, for returning. That shame deepens the attachment because it makes it harder to step away. Compassion, not criticism, is what loosens the grip. When you see that this pattern once protected you from abandonment or emotional chaos, you can stop fighting yourself and start listening. As you begin to feel into your body rather than your story, you may notice that attraction to unavailable men comes with anxiety, urgency, and self-doubt. It pulls you out of yourself. It narrows your focus. It makes you wait. This is not intuition guiding you toward love. It is an old survival signal, asking for resolution. Learning to pause in that moment, to stay present with the discomfort instead of chasing relief, is a radical shift. Choosing availability requires tolerating a new kind of vulnerability. It means allowing someone to see you when you are not performing, fixing, or waiting. It means letting yourself be affected by care rather than striving for it. That can feel unbearably exposed at first, because you no longer have distance as a buffer. But exposure is not danger. It only feels that way when your nervous system has not yet learned that connection can be safe. When you stop confusing longing with love, you begin to notice how much energy has gone into maintaining hope instead of honoring truth. You see that your desire was never the problem. Your capacity to love deeply was never the issue. The pain came care rather than striving for it. That can feel unbearably exposed at first, because you no longer have distance as a buffer. But exposure is not danger. It only feels that way when your nervous system has not yet learned that connection can be safe. When you stop confusing longing with love, you begin to notice how much energy has gone into maintaining hope instead of honoring truth. You see that your desire was never the problem. Your capacity to love deeply was never the issue. The pain came from directing that capacity towards someone who could not receive it. And slowly, as awareness replaces compulsion, the pull toward emotional unavailability begins to lose its intensity, not because you force it to, but because your system starts to recognize that what once felt exciting was actually exhausting. At some point, often quietly and without drama, a shift begins. You start to notice that the ache you feel in these relationships is not just sadness, but self-betrayal. It is the feeling of knowing, somewhere deep inside, that you are staying in a place where you are not met. This awareness does not arrive as clarity at first. It comes as fatigue, a tiredness of explaining yourself, a heaviness in your chest when you silence your needs yet again, a growing sense that love should not require you to disappear. For a long time, you may have mistaken self-abandonment for devotion. You learned that being easy, understanding, patient, and selfless kept connection alive. You minimized your desires, softened your truth, and told yourself that needing less made you stronger. But over time, your body keeps score. The cost of this pattern shows up as anxiety, resentment, numbness, or a quiet grief you cannot quite name. These are not signs that you are failing at love. They are signals that you are being asked to return to yourself. The turning point is not when the other person changes. It is when you stop organizing your life around the possibility that they might. You begin to recognize that waiting has become a way of postponing your own life. That hope, once a source of comfort, has become a cage. This realization can feel devastating, because it means facing the truth without fantasy as a buffer. It means acknowledging that love cannot be extracted from someone who is not able to give it, no matter how deeply you feel. As you start to come back to yourself, boundaries begin to form, not as walls, but as clarity. You notice what feels good and what does not. You pay attention to how your body responds, rather than how convincing the story sounds. When communication is inconsistent, your chest tightens. When affection is withheld, your energy drops. When your needs are dismissed, something inside you contracts. These sensations are not overreactions. They are information. For the first time, you allow yourself to trust them. With this trust comes grief. You grieve the relationships you hoped would transform. You grieve the versions of yourself that waited, adapted, and tried to be enough. You grieve the time spent chasing connection instead of experiencing it. This grief is not a setback. It is a passage. You cannot step into a new way of loving without mourning the old one. And mourning requires honesty, patience, and gentleness. Self-worth begins to shift when it is no longer dependent on being chosen. You start to feel your value as something inherent rather than conditional. This does not happen all at once. It happens in small moments of choosing yourself, saying no when you once said yes, pausing instead of pursuing, letting silence remain silent instead of filling it with effort. Each of these moments rewires the belief that love must be earned through suffering. As you practice staying with yourself, your definition of attraction changes. You become less impressed by intensity and more attuned to consistency. You notice who follows through, who listens, who makes space for your emotions. At first, this can feel unfamiliar, even dull, because your nervous system is learning a new language. But gradually, calm begins to register as safety rather than boredom. Presence starts to feel nourishing rather than strange. You may still feel drawn to emotionally unavailable people at times. Healing does not erase conditioning. It softens its grip. The difference is that you no longer abandon yourself in response to the pull. You can feel attraction without acting on it. You can acknowledge desire without sacrificing your needs. This is not suppression. It is discernment. It is the ability to choose in alignment with your well-being rather than your wounds. There is a profound empowerment in realizing that love is not something you have to chase. When connection is mutual, it unfolds without force. It does not require you to guess, wait, or shrink. It invites you to be fully yourself. And being fully yourself means allowing your emotions, needs, and boundaries to exist without apology. This kind of love does not ask you to prove your worth. It reflects it back to you. As you stand more firmly in yourself, loneliness may arise in new ways. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of letting go of familiar pain. This is a transitional loneliness, a space between patterns. It can feel unsettling because it is empty of the drama and intensity you once knew. But this space is not absence. It is possibility. It is where a new relationship with yourself takes root. You begin to speak to yourself differently, with less criticism and more care. You recognize that your longing was never a flaw, but a sign of your capacity for connection. You stop trying to harden yourself and instead learn to protect yourself. Protection does not mean closing your heart. It means choosing environments where your heart can remain open without being wounded. Over time, the question shifts from why don't they love me to how do I treat myself when love is not returned. And in answering that question, you reclaim your agency. You realize that staying is a choice, not a destiny. That leaving is not failure, but self-respect. That love which costs you your sense of self is too expensive. Each moment you choose honesty over hope, presence over fantasy, and self-connection over pursuit. You are rewriting the story your nervous system once learned. You are teaching it that love can be safe, mutual, and sustaining. And in doing so, you are no longer waiting to be chosen because you are already standing in choice, rooted in your own worth, aware of your needs, and committed to honoring them in every connection that touches your life.